education.
Yeah.
The new Camaro and everything.
Call this meeting to order. Mary, read the roll.
Here.
Here.
There.
Here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. I will entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda as presented. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Have a motion by Commissioner Howard. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second by Commissioner Ferris. Any questions or concerns? Mary, read the roll.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much. Now, next item on the agenda is a proclamation. So, this Mayor, proclamation, City of Goodland, Kansas, Goodland Gary Day. Whereas Northwest Kansas should not rely on groundhog from Pennsylvania or an armadillo from Texas to accurately forecast our spring, and whereas Goodland has access to a highly reliable jackalope named Gary for our spring forecast, as we should honor him. And whereas an accurate reading by the Goodland Gary is obtainable on April 1st at noon, and whereas our community needs some levity, now therefore I, John Garcia, Mayor of the City of Goodland, do hereby proclaim April 1st, 2021 as Goodland Gary Day in the City of Goodland, and encourage all citizens and businesses to join the celebration thereof. In witness thereof, whereof I hereunto set my hand, cause the seal of the City of Goodland, Kansas to be affixed this 15th day of March 2021. Thank you. Okay, moving on with the agenda, we move on to, nobody has signed in for public comment, right? Okay. We move into item B, presentation from Sunflower and Prairie Land Electric. Whoever wants to take the podium first. Thank you.
It's on.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to you tonight. We wanted to summarize the cold weather event that happened last month. Obviously, the power price was a little higher than anybody anticipated. We want to kind of walk through what happened, what we did to prepare for that, and some of the impacts associated with that. My name is Corey Linville. I'm the Vice President of Power Supply and Delivery for Sunflower Electric. Sunflower is a generation and transmission cooperative, and we are wholly owned by 6 member distribution cooperatives. One of those member distribution cooperatives is Prairie Land, and Kurt Gerard is the CEO of Prairie Land Electric. And Erica Villarreal is also here. She works for Sunflower. She's the manager of power contracts. So I put together a PowerPoint to kind of walk through with you guys tonight. If you have any questions, feel free to stop me, and I'll pause at the end as well with any questions you may have. So the first slide is just a summary of what I'd like to talk about. So we'll kind of review the event, what happened operationally. Second of all, we'll talk about how Sunflower hedges for events like this. Next, we'll talk about how Sunflower's hedge compares with hedges provided by other power suppliers in the area. And then finally, we'll talk about how our energy cost adjustment is calculated. The energy cost adjustment is a portion of our rate that's directly calculated from market energy cost and fuel cost. So in terms of a review next slide that shows the Southwest Power Pool region. For those of you that don't know, the Southwest Power Pool is a regional transmission organization. All power suppliers in that area that's shaded with the red hatch are a member of SPP. SPP provides transmission service, provides transmission planning, and also provides a wholesale energy market to all the participants in SPP. And you can see that area shaded in dark blue there is the part of the country that experienced extreme cold weather during the middle of February, and that area pretty much fully encompasses all of SPP. So the entire SPP footprint was a part of this cold weather event, and the operational impacts were felt by everybody in the Southwest Power Pool. The next slide has some of the details of what happened. Amongst other things, the Southwest Power Pool is the balancing authority for the entire SPP region. And with that responsibility, they're responsible for matching the generation in the entire region to the demand of the entire region. So electricity is kind of an instantaneous type of a product. There has to be a constant matching of generation to the usage by all the consumers in the region. In addition to that, they have to maintain adequate reserves. So at any given time, there has to be an amount of reserve capacity that can start and generate instantaneously. If there's a generator that trips offline, or if there's a large swing in regulation that needs to be accounted for. So SPP has the energy online to meet the demand, plus capacity available to meet any contingencies that may occur. SPP, as the balancing authority, constantly coordinates with all the load serving entities in the region. Sunflower's load serving entity, KMEA, Midwest Energy, Evergy, those are all load serving entities within the region. SPP has to understand what their load forecast is, what generation they have available, and SPP identifies what generation is most optimal to serve that load. SPP also coordinates with transmission operators, such as Sunflower, Evergy, to ensure that demand and reserve requirements are balanced with generation. On February 9th, SPP identified that there was cold weather forecast for the region, and they declared what's called conservative operations in preparation for that cold weather. So under conservative operations, generator owners and operators start to take a more conservative approach to their generation. So any maintenance that they can defer, anything that may put the unit at risk, they try to avoid that so that the generation is as available as can be for that cold weather event. On Sunday, February 14th, SPP foresaw that the following week they were going to be in a potential capacity and energy shortfall. So they made a request to all the members of SPP to issue a public appeal for conservation of energy. On February 15th, at 5 o'clock in the morning, SPP entered into what's called an Energy Emergency Alert, or EEA. Under an EEA, the SPP Balancing Authority foresaw, again, that there was a lack of generation to serve the region's load and reserve requirements. And there are 3 levels of EEA, level 1, 2, and 3, with increasing severity as you increase the number. So under an EEA level 1, that means that all available generation is committed, and there was concern about being able to meet and maintain reserve requirements. During the period from February 15th to the 19th, SPP was in an EEA level 1 for almost 39 hours. EEA level 2 is the next level of emergency, and during that period of time, SPP was in an EEA 2 for 43 hours and 20 minutes. EEA 3 is the highest level of emergency, and that's the period when SPP does not have adequate reserves and load shedding is imminent. So during this period, SPP was in an EEA level 3 for 9 hours and 7 minutes. And during that period of time, SPP, for the first time in its history, had to issue a directive to curtail load. So as a transmission operator, we were one of the entities that SPP directed to shed a certain percentage of our load. On Monday, February 15th, the total SPP load shed was 610 megawatts. Sunflower represents about 1.5%, about 2% of the total SPP load. So we had to shed 14 megawatts of that total 610 megawatts. All the transmission operators across that 14-state region were part of the load shed. Each one was allocated a load ratio share, and everybody had to shed load immediately upon getting that directive from SPP. That first load shed on the 15th lasted for 1 hour and 7 minutes, and as a transmission operator, Sunflower trains for these types of events. When we train, we typically train for 10 to 15 megawatts of load shed. So this was right kind of up our alley in terms of what we trained for. The next day, SPP again entered into an EEA 3, and that morning they issued a load shed directive for a total of 1,359 megawatts across the SPP footprint. Of that total, our prorated portion was 30 megawatts. So the load shed was twice as much as it was the day before. And then about 22 minutes later, they stacked on another 30 megawatt load shed directive. So we had a total of 60 megawatts that we had to shed for a period of 2 hours and 22 minutes. So that was 4 times the amount that we typically trained for. We did have load shed circuits built in the SCADA that we could operate. We did our best to try to rotate those circuits to try to minimize outage time for any particular load to more than an hour. Because of the magnitude of the load shed, we did have some customers that were out longer than that. But the important thing was that we maintained reliability, we followed the load shed directive, and a larger, more consequential outage was averted because we were able to do that.
Kurt, one question. When you allude to the fact that there was a lack of generation resources to serve the region, that included all of the entities in the Southwest Power Pool. And was that being attributed because there was not enough natural gas, there was not enough wind power, there was not enough nuclear power? It was a combination that could no longer supply the region, and that's why you go into this lack of generation resources.
Yeah, we'll get into that on the next
Okay.
slide too, but
Okay.
in general, what you said is accurate. So every day, SPP identifies the forecasted load for that entire 14-state region. They look at all the generation that's available in that 14-state region, and there's an economic process through their wholesale energy market where they pick the cheapest available resources to serve the load. In this case, for a variety of reasons we'll get into, there wasn't enough generation to serve the load. So if you go to the next slide, it was really a function of both low supply and high demand. So on the supply side, there was generator unavailability due to lack of fuel supply. Natural gas, the wells in the field began to freeze off. Some of the pipelines were also having issues. So there was a general lack of supply on the natural gas side. There was also a very low period for wind. The wind itself was very low. And the wind generators, when the wind did blow, had problems with icing in the southern parts of Oklahoma and Texas. And then even in our region, there are certain generators that have a 5-degree Fahrenheit cutoff temperature. So below that temperature, regardless of the icing conditions, the lubrication that they have up in the nacelle begins to lose its viscosity and they have to shut down. So wind generation was unavailable. There was a lack of natural gas to supply natural gas-fired generation. On the supply side, SPP set a new high for a winter peak. So the demand for energy was very high, primarily due to the cold weather and everybody running their heaters. And then there was also a difficulty in getting energy in from neighboring RTOs. So typically, if there's a problem in SPP, that problem's not big enough to spread into MISO or ERCOT or other areas that neighbor SPP, and we can import from those regions. This was a big enough area that everybody was having issues, and we couldn't import, SPP couldn't import either. So we lost import capability in addition to the lack of generation and the high demand, and that's really what caused the shortfall. This next slide, unfortunately, kind of printed out where it's difficult to read, but it shows you what the generation mix was during the event on the left, and then on the right, kind of what the generation mix has been since the start of the year. And the pie chart at the bottom of the graph kind of shows the dynamic here. The big thing you'll notice on the right, that kind of dark green quadrant up in the upper right-hand corner is wind. So year to date, wind has supplied about 31% of the energy in SPP. During this event, wind supplied about 10%. So it was down substantially. The gap was made up primarily from coal, which is the dark blue region in the lower left on the pie chart on the left-hand side, and then gas. So without the wind, and without the ability to import as much, that's really what kind of made up the gap. Coal and gas were challenged by the cold weather conditions. Being fossil fuel resources, they are exposed to the elements. Anything that's outside on the cooling side, or steam that could be exposed to high cold temperatures, was exposed to freezing. So some of those gas-fired generators and coal-fired generators had outages because of the cold weather as well. But you can see there what made up the mix, and the big loss was really on the wind side. So the next slide starts to talk about some of the financial impacts. As the supply of natural gas began to drop off and the demand began to increase, the price for natural gas skyrocketed. Typically this time of year, we're used to seeing prices in the $2.50 per MMBTU range. You can see what happened beginning on February 11th as prices got as high as $1,000. So 400 times what we would typically see as the price for natural gas is what we saw during this event. Market energy prices, which are the prices we pay for electricity from the SPP wholesale energy market, also skyrocketed. Natural gas prices play a very big part of how the price for electricity is formed. So market energy prices this time of year, typically in the $20 to $25 per megawatt hour range, got as high as almost $4,000 per megawatt hour. So 200 times a very extreme economic impact associated with this event. So the next slide starts to talk about what Sunflower does to protect ourselves from this type of event. This is kind of an unprecedented event since the SPP Integrated Marketplace started back in March of 2014. The highest pricing we've seen before this event was maybe $100 per megawatt hour. Now we're talking $4,000 per megawatt hour. What we do to hedge ourselves is we look at the dispatchable capacity from our coal-fired generator. Coal is very stable in terms of pricing compared to natural gas. We didn't see any increase in our coal price during this event. So we can pretty much be assured that we can get energy from our Holcomb coal-fired generator at about $20 to $22 per megawatt hour. So whatever that dispatchable capacity is from Holcomb, we know that power supply is going to be capped at that $22 price. We also have fixed price energy from the renewable energy purchase power agreements that we have. We have 3 wind purchase power agreements and 1 solar purchase power agreement. Those are priced at a fixed price. So whatever those resources are able to provide, again, we know what that price is going to be. It's not going to be exposed to that market volatility. So the chart on this graph shows the percentage of energy that we predict we're going to get from coal in the blue and renewable energy from the green. And we try to maintain that percentage between 60 and 100% for the following 12 months. So you can see, for February, March, and April, we were anticipating about 90% hedge from coal and from the renewable energy PPAs. We'll get into what actually happened. Coal performed very well, as we've already discussed. Wind and, to a certain extent, solar weren't as available as we anticipated, so that portion of our hedge was impacted. The next slide has a graph of what actually happened in February. On this particular graph, the blue line at the top is the total sunflower load. The gray shaded region underneath is Holcomb's output during the event. The darker green, gray on top of that is the output we got from our wind. And then the black, which didn't happen very often, we only have 20 megawatts of solar, but that's the amount of solar output we have. So the combination of that dark gray, or the light gray, the dark gray and the black, again, is what we have hedged at a known price. Anything above that, which I've represented in different colors, represents our exposure to the market. And the colors here represent the market price during those periods of exposure. So the blue sections early in the month that we were exposed to a market price somewhere less than $30. The green would be market price between 30 and 100, yellow 100 to 500, and then red is really where we were exposed to the highest price from that February 15th to February 19th period when SPP was in the energy emergency alert. And you can see, fortunately, Holcomb was online and operating the full load during that period. Unfortunately, we didn't have a lot of wind, but Holcomb was able to help us reduce our exposure to the market by about 70%. So our hedge percentage during the period from February 10th through the 20th was about 64%. And then during that worst period from the 15th to the 19th, we were hedged at 70% by that output from Holcomb. So Holcomb really helped us a lot by providing us with that $22 power and not exposing us to the $4,000 market power. talk about power supply, it really is a cost versus risk balance. And when you choose a power supplier, you're typically gonna get a certain number of resources, and those resources are gonna come with a cost for the capacity and a cost for the energy. Typically, the higher the cost of the capacity, the lower the cost of the energy, or the better insurance policy you're gonna get against market energy prices. KMEA provides power to several municipalities in the region. Just by way of reference, KMEA typically will go out and they'll procure chunks of resources that then they'll allocate to their cities to meet their power supply requirements. So some of the resources that KMEA uses to service cities include GRDA, which is a gas-fired generation resource. They have wind contracts. They have Dogwood, which is also a gas-fired generator. WAPA, which is hydro. Southwest Power, which is also hydro. And then we've shown you some graphs here of some cities that KMEA serves to kind of show you what that cost versus risk paradigm looks like and how that plays out in events like this. So at the low end of the spectrum in terms of cost, high end in terms of risk, City of Ashland has a power supply portfolio that's almost 75% exposed to the market, about 15% exposed to wind, and then also some WAPA. Their price just doesn't include transmission, but their power supply price is low, $24. But that's if everything is operating quote unquote normal. During an event like we just had, whereas we were headed to 70% with our Holcomb resource, they're going to be exposed 75% to the market. And they're also going to be exposed for whatever their wind didn't generate, which was quite a bit during this event. So you can kind of see what some of the other cities look like. Beloit, for instance, has 75% from a gas-fired resource. So typically gas provides a limited hedge, but because the market price of energy follows the price of gas, that's a little bit of a tricky hedge because when your market energy prices go high, a lot of times it's because the price of natural gas is high as well. So on the next slide, we kind of talk about the city of Garden City. Garden City has, from our knowledge, one of the stronger hedge positions of all of the KMEA cities. They have a lot of fixed price portions of their contract, and they indicated that during this event they had $8 to $11 million in incremental costs associated with the cold weather event. So if you take that $8 to $11 million, you divide it by their total energy consumption in February, which is about 22.2 thousand megawatt hours, that equates to a cost of about 36 to 50 cents per kilowatt hour. Sunflower's estimated incremental costs from the event are about 28 cents per kilowatt hour. So the hedge provided by Holcomb, that insurance policy, really paid off in this event, and that's illustrated by these numbers. Again, Garden City has one of the highest, best hedges of the portfolio when it came to the A fleet, and they had prices that were substantially higher than what we experienced, 50 to 100% what Sunflower's incremental energy costs were. So just to give you a feel, during the month of February, Goodland's total energy consumption was about 4,500 megawatt hours at a cost of 28.4 cents per kilowatt hour, which is what our ECA ended up being for the incremental piece. That equates to an incremental cost of about 1.2 million. If Goodland had a similar power supply arrangement to what Garden City has, that level of hedge versus cost, then the financial impact from the cold weather event would have been about 1.6 to 2.2 million. So again, just to give you a feel for when you're choosing a power supplier, one of the pieces you have to look at is cost. The other piece you want to look at is that hedging potential for the risk side of the paradigm. Next slide starts to talk about how we calculate our energy cost adjustment, which is the variable cost piece of our rate. It's a methodology that's defined in a published tariff. It identifies the variable cost of energy, which includes fuel costs, purchase power agreement costs, and settlements in the SPP integrated marketplace. And the next slides show how we calculate that. So I don't want to bore you with too much detail, but I think it's helpful to kind of see how this works. The first slide is an example from January. So January would be more of a typical month for us. And the way we calculate the energy cost adjustment is we start off with the energy energy we buy from the market to serve our load. So any given month, Sunflower's gonna have a quantity of energy that we need to serve Sunflower's load. We buy all of that energy from the SPP integrated marketplace. We then sell our resources into the market based on their production costs and whether or not they are economic in the market. And whatever revenues we earn from that, we use to offset that cost of energy. So the top line in January represents our market cost of load for the energy we serve in January. We purchased about 362,000 megawatt hours to serve our load at a cost of about $5.8 million. So that pencils out to about $16.08 per megawatt hour, or about 1.6 cents per kilowatt hour. During the month, the next series of lines there represent how our generation resources perform. So Holcomb generated, and it earned a margin that equated to about 1.49 cent, excuse me, $1.49 per megawatt hour reduction in that market energy cost of load. You can see that if you add up all the revenues that we earn from our generation resources, the non-renewable resources, our cost of load was reduced down to $14.54 from that $16.08 starting point. Our renewable contracts, again, those are fixed price contracts. Those are must-take contracts. So in this month, the purchase power agreement cost for that energy from the wind was higher than the market price we were able to sell it at. So they did not earn a positive margin. We actually earned a negative margin on those resources, which contributed to a little bit higher ECA. So if you include the margins earned from those resources, that bumped our ECA up to 1843. There are a variety of other variable costs that are part of the market settlements. In this particular month, those were a net reduction to the ECA. So for the month, our ECA was $17.88 or 1.8 cents per kilowatt hour, which was less than our budget of $21.12. The next slide shows what our ECA calculation looked like in February 2021, which again is very unprecedented, not something we're used to seeing. But for this month, our market cost to serve our load was almost $600 per megawatt hour, or 60 cents per kilowatt hour. To give you a feel for the magnitude of that price, in February 2021, we spent $194 million for the 325,000 megawatt hours we need to serve our load. If you add up all the costs from the previous 27 months, we spent about the same amount of money, $195 million, and that was to serve 10 million megawatt hours. So again, just to give you a feel for how high the prices got last month. This graph also illustrates again how important Holcomb was to us to keep our costs relatively under control compared to what they could have been. For this particular month, Holcomb earned a margin of $116 million. So we spent $194 million for the energy we need to serve our load. We were able to sell our output from Holcomb into the market and earn $116 million to help offset that total cost. So you can see that red line there kind of represents, we started at 600, Holcomb saved us $360 per megawatt hour because of the margins it was able to earn. Some of our gas generation, we operated at a loss. As you can see by the green portions of the graph, we do anticipate we're going to get some additional make-whole payments from the market. Without, again, getting too far into the weeds, there are processes for us to identify to the market monitor what our actual costs are, when our gas units are committed for liability purposes, and if we don't fully recover our costs, there's a process for us to show them these are our gas costs, this is what we earn from the market, you need to make us whole for the difference between those two. Those make-whole processes take time, and we anticipate they'll be fully settled within the next 3 months. So if we get additional credits from that, that'll be credited back into a future month ECA calculation. The flip side of that is all the other gas generators in SPP are also going to be asking for make-whole payments, and our load is going to have to pay for our load ratio share of all those make-whole payments as well. So right now, we're anticipating that the make-whole payment credits we get for our generation will roughly be equivalent to the make-whole payment charges we get to pay for everybody else's make-whole payments. So we think that's going to be about a wash. But again, hopefully this kind of shows you how we calculate ECA, how important Holcomb was to us during this event, gives you a feel for what happened, what the costs are, what happened operationally. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Did you hear all of that, JD?
Yep.
entertain, how many days did that actual Arctic wave last?
The cold temperatures really kind of began around the 10th or 11th. The coldest part of the temperatures began Sunday, February 14th, and lasted till about Thursday or Friday of that week, so from about the 14th till the 18th or 19th. By the 20th, things had warmed up enough that prices were back to normal in terms of natural gas prices, market energy prices, and no more need for energy emergency alerts. Really, that period from February 15th to the 19th was the worst period.
And how many days did you run the sunflower plant there at Holcomb?
Holcomb was online for most of the month. It was offline for a few days early in the month because we had a forced maintenance outage to fix a bottom mass chain conveyor. We got it back online quickly enough that it was running prior to the start of the cold weather event, and it ran for the remainder of the month.
And you were running, you said approximately at $22 with what was costing you to,
Yeah, our production costs are typically in that $20 to $22 per megawatt hour.
so that's what kept some municipalities from absorbing such a huge cost because so what was the open market price at that particular, did you guys go out and buy power on the open market?
We buy all of our power from the integrated marketplace, just like everybody in SPP does.
Mhm.
It's a market that all SPP members participate in. So we bought 100% of our energy from that market, but we sold from Holcomb about 70% of what our energy requirements were. The net effect of that was 70% of the energy we needed to serve our load cost us about $22. 30% during the event cost us $2,000 to $3,000.
Any questions from the commission? JD?
Well, I guess my thoughts kind of are, I don't like the fact that we're dependent on whether the wind blows or whether the ice freezes on the blades or whether they're starting to, for the solar and the way we hedged, and it feels like we got a good deal with $1.5 million bill.
Mhm. Any questions? JJ?
Not really, there's a lot of information here.
Yeah.
It just goes to show you that we can't be 100% green.
Mhm.
You have to have fossil fuel.
I think diversity is an important part of the energy portfolio. It's great to have a certain percentage green, but when it comes to reliability and cost control, I think you have to have diversity. Yeah, so, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which is Department of Energy,
Mhm.
and NERC, who's a branch of FERC, the reliability piece of that, they're going to be, they already have open an investigation into what happened. They will look at the natural gas side of the business, they'll look at the electric side of the business, they'll look at what can be done to prevent freezing, what can be done to, enhance generator availability in these types of events. Sunflower will take another look at our hedging policies and determine if there's anything we can do to improve upon that. There are different strategies that can be employed, but just like when you go and buy insurance for anything, the more you want to protect yourself, the higher your premium is going to be. And again, you have to find that balance between cost and risk and how you want to manage that. But we fully anticipate that investigation from FERC and NERC will take several weeks and probably will result in some additional regulation associated with freeze protection on generators and other things like that. So I don't know if there's anything else in that.
Southwest Park will also formed a committee to look into the events as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, they have, I think it's 5 different operating groups that are looking at it from operational reliability, economics, I forget the other categories, but they're looking at it from a variety of different perspectives to try to identify what happened, what we need to do better, what we need to prevent this from happening again. Unfortunately, we're not Texas. Texas had it worse than we did.
Yes. Yeah, they did.
This the day traders on
gas that made all the money?
Somebody made all the money on the gas side, and day traders, probably some of them won a lot, some probably lost a lot too. I think a big part of the investigation is gonna be, where did all that money go? You know, who really profited from it, and should they profit as much as they did? Should there be price caps on the supply and demand of natural gas, and try to prevent that kind of uncontrolled escalation of prices that we saw?
Any question?
Yeah. I mean, not really questions. I mean, it was a very good synopsis, and like I said, there's a lot of factors that happened, that caused this. That a lot of which were not under your guys' control, But I guess my concern as the commissioner for the city of Goodland is, moving forward, how us with our own ability to create our own power. At which point, during this peak time, we were creating our own power, so we weren't actually pulling on your grid any. How can our contract be renegotiated or whatever we need to do in the future so that when a certain peak hits or something and we are then generating, I mean, I understand that we get a credit for having the ability to create our power, but at some point in time, it's got to be worth more than the credit we get. Like, I feel like the power that we generated is worth a lot more than the credit that we are getting for having that ability. So my concern is moving forward is how do we address that?
Yeah, that's definitely something we can discuss in a future contract. To a certain extent, I think your generation was exposed to some elevated natural gas prices, but you do have dual fuel capability and you're burning a lot of diesel that was much cheaper than what we were producing with natural gas. So I think there is discussion to be had about how we may be able to offset a portion of your power supply differently than what we do under the current contract terms. I mean, the way it works now, you still get all of your power supply from Sunflower, and we pay you for all of your production costs for your generation. So 99% of the time, that's gonna work just fine. But 100% of the time, like we had in February, I can see where, we may think that isn't as fair as it could be. And we can, discuss that if we have the opportunities to negotiate a different contract with you guys.
Okay, thank you.
I got a follow up to that. I'm just curious how many other municipalities have a similar contract like ours, where when we run, we just get the credit. Are all the other municipalities contracts the same, or is there some that are carved out where they can run independently and be free from any adjustments or credits or costs and just run independently during that time?
Yeah, all the municipal capacity, all the municipal contracts that we have, or we have capacity call arrangements like we have with you, are structured the same as your contract. We don't have any that are carved out where you basically offset your power supply with your generation.
All right, thank you.
So any other questions? Okay.
The odds of this happening again is pretty slim, isn't it?
I hope so.
That's a dumb question.
Depends on which politician or which scientist you wanna listen to that talks about, impacts of climate change and that sort of thing. Since 2014, like I said, the highest market prices that we have seen in SPP are $100, and we saw $4,000 during this event. So I would say that the odds of this are pretty unlikely.
Price gouging.
Kurt, would you just in layman terms, for the benefit of the commission, explain to us how the OATT, which is Open Access Transmission Tariff, works?
700-page document.
Yeah, but I mean, I said layman terms.
That's right. So the open access transmission tariff is the tariff that governs how the Southwest Power Pool provides transmission service to its members. So it includes how you procure service, there's network service, there's point-to-point service. It identifies how the costs of the transmission system are calculated and then allocated to the transmission customers. It also identifies how the transmission planning process should work. So one of the advantages of RTO is you have regionalized planning. So rather than having a bunch of smaller entities doing their own planning and having a hodgepodge, you have a big, 14-state region that's doing coordinated planning, which should provide more efficient service. The tariff describes how that works. The tariff also describes the protocols associated with the wholesale energy market. So I was just walking through the SPP integrated marketplace, how all that works is outlined in the OATT, the Open Access Transmission Tariff. There's a variety of other things that are part of that, but the main thing it does is it identifies how SPP provides the service, how costs are determined, and how those costs are allocated. One of the things that Sunflower's been heavily involved in recently is trying to find a better, more fair way to allocate cost of transmission upgrades that have been driven by wind projects in western Kansas. So if you think about western Kansas, we're a pretty small load, but we've had a very high percentage of the new transmission built in SPP. And the big reason for that is we've had 4,000 megawatts of wind built in western Kansas for 1,000 megawatts of load in western Kansas. So that excess has to be exported, and it's exported across transmission facilities that weren't built to do that, so you have to build new transmission facilities. So historically, the way that OATT described those costs should be allocated was the region, the local regions should pay for 2/3 of those costs, and the rest of the 14-state region should pay for 1/3 of those costs. That doesn't really seem fair when our load hasn't increased, but our transmission has increased substantially just because of the wind being built and sent to others. So we've been successful in trying to get a new cost allocation methodology passed that will greatly reduce that amount of transmission costs that we have to pay for that new transmission. Petitioning right now with FERC to get that rule finalized, but that should reduce our transmission costs substantially, and you'll see that on your bill.
In doing some research, there are other in the Southwest Power Pool agencies that offer, the product just as you guys do, and some of the diversity in their language allows municipalities to go out and buy at any given time cheaper power from other sources without any penalties. In the language in your contract, is that a provision, or is that we can do that?
Yeah, basically you guys get our wholesale member rate, and our wholesale member rate is a function of our participation in the market. So if market energy prices are less than the production cost of our generation, you're going to get that low price. There's going to be, our renewable energy PPAs are going to be kind of a must take, so that's going to eat into that a little bit. But you'll see months when your ECA may be as low as $10 or $12 for 1 cent to 1.2 cents per kilowatt hour. There'll be other months, when market energy prices are higher, where we're going to be capped like we were last month because we do have generation that has a production cost. So you do get access to the lower energy market prices when they are available, and then you also get a cap when the market prices go higher than that based on our generation production.
Sure. Understand. Any questions from the commission still? The other thing that has been conveyed to the commission is that you are entertaining a possibility of wanting for the municipality to extend a 5-year program. That being the case, it's also been conveyed to us that you're willing to disregard the $1.274 million for us if we give you an additional 5-year extension on the contract, right?
We have some contract extension options that include a reduction in contract price. And if you are interested in entertaining that, the reduction in the contract price, if we were to allocate you $1.27 million over, I don't remember the exact months, but let's say 24 months, the cost of that over 24 months would be less than the cost savings that you would get. So you'd still end up getting a net reduction in cost over that period of time due to the savings being greater than the cost allocated over 24 months. Now, these contract extensions, we have options. So what I was telling you before about the cost versus risk balance, historically, when we come to you, we said, here's our wholesale member rate, this is what we have to offer. We wanted to find a way to give you more control over how you balance cost versus risk. So that one of the offers we have that gives you that savings is what we call our discount full requirements option. It does have a little bit more risk on the capacity side of the equation, but the cost overall, if you don't have to exercise that insurance policy, if you will, it does end up providing you cost savings. So, you know, if and when you want us to come and give you the full-blown proposal for that extension, we can show you what those different options look like, what the savings are, and what the increase in risk might look like as well.
And our contract expires with you, I believe, December 31st, 2026, right? And so at the time that that expires, I was reading the contract, then we operate on a year-to-year basis until either municipality or Sunflower, by written request, says we want to terminate. So is there a 90-day, or can we give it at any particular time in the contract?
The termination notice,
Probably a year, might be two, but
I think it's a year from what I read here.
but I mean, you can give us contract notification sooner than that if you want to. We hope you give us a chance to talk about extension.
Sure. Well, I've got some more questions, but at this, Dustin, Mary, do you guys have any questions? Yes. Okay. All right. The other thing, there's on section 5.6 that refers to the addition and deletion of accredited generating capacities. One of the lines that caught me here, and maybe you can allude and explain to the commission, it says the city may make planned deletions to the accredited generating capacity with 1 year's written notice to Sunflower. Now, explain to us in layman terms what that explains and how the municipality would even begin to know a year ahead of time what the markets are doing or anything. Please.
And as a load serving entity in SPP, we have to have enough accreditable capacity to meet our peak load plus a 12% reserve margin. So we meet that requirement with our generation, Holcomb, and the other generation we own. We also buy some of that from you as part of our power supply arrangement with you. So I think the total we buy from Holcomb is, or from Goodland is maybe 13 or 14 megawatts, something like that.
Is that right? Yeah.
And we pay you for that.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to submit our report to SPP to show that we are in compliance with that capacity requirement every February 15th for the following year. So what we're saying in that contract is if you have a planned retirement of an asset, if you plan to take engine 12 out and retire it, we would like to know that a year in advance so that we can take it out of our report. We don't include it in our report to show compliance, and then it's not there and we're short. So that's really what that part of the contract is designed to do, is to give us advance notice so that we don't claim capacity that ends up not being there. And we can be penalized by SPP if we don't have enough capacity to meet that limit requirement.
There's let me see if I can find this here. On the assignment, so you can actually transfer on the open market at any time that you choose without permission from the municipality or anybody else, right? Well, it says section on page 19, successors and assignments, and it says right here, Sunflower, without the approval of Prairie Land or the city, may assign, transfer, mortgage, or pledge this agreement to the Mid-Kansas Electric Company, LCC, to create a security interest for the benefit of the United States of America, acting through the administrator of the rural utilities. What I'm saying is you could sell this contract.
Well, it's specific to Mid-Kansas.
Hmm.
Mid-Kansas was a sister organization to Sunflower. Sunflower and Mid-Kansas merged at the beginning of 2020. So we built that flexibility in because we had certain contracts that it made sense for us to serve from Sunflower, certain contracts that it made sense for us to serve from Mid-Kansas. Sunflower was the operating entity for Mid-Kansas. Mid-Kansas was an asset holding company only that was formed back in 2007 when the Sunflower members bid on the Aquila, Kansas properties. At that time, Sunflower had RUS debt, so we restricted on what we could do. We formed Mid-Kansas to give the members that flexibility. They were successful in that acquisition, so that's when we got things like our Fort Dodge generator. We doubled our load associated with that acquisition. And then our intent all along was to get out of the RUS debt, merge the two companies, and we won, which we completed in 2020.
The other question was, we were being charged $9.84 per megawatt, and then it went to $14.07 during summer. So explain that a little bit.
You're talking about the demand.
You're right. Mm-hmm.
There's a summer and a non-summer portion of that demand rate. So during the non-summer months, we charge the smaller number, and then during the three summer months, we charge the larger number. And the reason for that is, I mentioned that capacity requirement.
Mm-hmm.
The capacity requirement is a function of our annual peak load, and we are a summer peaking facility. So we try to give a monetary incentive for our customers to keep that peak as low as they can during the peak season, which in turn reduces our capacity obligation, the amount of money we have to spend on generation that ultimately gets flowed back to the customers anyway. So it's just a fairly common mechanism in rate design to financially incent lower demand during peak periods.
We used to buy power directly from you. So what year was it? 2015 when Sunflower contracted through Prairie Land as well? Was it 2012? Mm-hmm. Now we used to buy it directly from you. I realize that you have members, to serve, just like we have, our buyers, and I think your members is Prairie Land, Victory, Pioneer, Wheatland, Lane Scott, and Western Cooperative. So in 2012, we got dropped off from buying directly from you, correctly? Okay. And that time, you made an additional agreement with Prairie Land to use their source to bill us, right?
We're the generation transmission provider for all of our members, including Prairie Land. So all of their power supply comes from us. The agreement that you mentioned, we transitioned from Sunflower being the direct power supplier to Prairie Land being the power supplier. Again, the Sunflower wholesale power still comes from us.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, from maybe this is more a question for Kurt, for Mr. Gerard, so from 2012, the adder fee has been $1.65 million. Would you explain to the commission how you actually bill us mills for mega kilowatt or megawatt? Give us an explanation on that end of things.
The mill adder was originally, and I wasn't part of the negotiation at the time, but it was based on the WHM plus an adder. And the adder stayed in the co-op because we assumed the risk, and we assumed the risk as a member of Sunflower. Anything, we had costs, and there are costs.
Can I stop you just for a little? Could you hand him the microphone so that those who are listening to us can?
I wasn't part of the original negotiation, but from what I understood, and Corey can correct me if I'm wrong, but at the time we developed the WHM rate plus an adder. The adder stayed at the co-op level because the co-op and Goodland became a member of Prairie Land. You were a member and you have voting rights, and we issued Goodland, and when your contract extends or quits in 2026, we still have that risk of load, and we have the risk of Holcomb and the decommissioning of Holcomb at some point. So that adder was to allow, additional, I guess, coverage of that risk going forward for anything that we extend on to Goodland and you decide to not be a member of Grant any longer.
Any questions for Mr. Dura? Okay. Go ahead, Corey.
Prior to the 2012 contract change, there still was a pattern in our contract that Sunflower paid the cooperative. So this is just a more transparent way that you see where those dollars go. And you see now that the adder directly as opposed to before you got a bill from Sunflower. A portion of that was what we paid for it.
Okay, thank you. Again, any questions? Mary, Dustin? None. Okay. So, no questions from you guys? No more. Okay. So, I think the commission, would entertain, and if you don't, speak up, but would entertain, a forthcoming proposal from you guys. And in that proposal, what I would recommend for the benefit of the commission is to manifest it in a way, in a paper proposal, highlight the areas that would be equitable for this particular body to sink their teeth into and be able to understand that it would be just as equitable for us as it would be for you, because we know that you have to make money. Nobody's in business not to make money, and that's the way that we want it. But in order for us to be able to make a decision that would best serve our people and the people who work for us, we would need to understand that it has to be just as equitable for us. And so, you can take, as long as, as you need, to formulate that. You'll forward it to the city. The city will disseminate it, to us, so that we can take a look at it and try to understand, all the language as much as we can as to what we're committing, not only the municipality but our customers too as well. So that would be my proposal, unless the commission would want to add anything to that.
No,
Be good
I
to
think
look
so.
at.
I mean, I think we're open for conversation, it is what we are.
We're very happy to do that. We have a presentation we put together that kind of summarizes our proposal.
Mhm.
We can share that with you.
Sure.
If you want us to send that to you in advance, and maybe come back to a later commission meeting and review that with you, answer any questions, we'd be happy to do that. Again, how do you want to proceed on that? What are your rules?
Sure, I think that would be awesome if you could get it to us in advance. That'd give the commission, some time to digest, and if there's any questions, then when you come to present it, they'd be prepared and ready to ask. So, okay, no other questions.
Do you like to target a certain commission date for us to come back?
Well, that's going to be up to you how soon you formulate that contract. But when you get it to Mary or the city manager, they can communicate it to us, and then we can set a date at that. Sure. Okay.
Great,
Thank
thank you.
Every.
Alan about it, we didn't want to rush it. Now we get the proposal now, we wanted to
Sure.
let things settle down a little bit.
No, we absolutely, we want to welcome, a presentation from you guys. We've done business with you guys for many years. All right. Well, thank you so much. Okay, you bet.
Thank you.
Okay. Move on to item number 4, consent agenda. Item A, March 1st Commission meeting minutes. Item B, March 8th Special Commission meeting minutes. And C, appropriation ordinances 2021-06, 2021-06A, and 2021 P06. I will entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
I'll move.
I have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Thompson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Howard. Any questions or concerns? Mary, read the roll.
Yes.
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 Yes, thank you. Okay, we move on to item number 5, ordinances and resolutions. Extraordinary power cost. I think that the commission has been handed some new information by the city manager, mainly a spreadsheet that accounts for the number of residential accounts, small commercial and large commercial. Breakdown there, what the percentages are, reflecting the current proposal that we had before the commission, which passed 3-2 at the last meeting. There's been some extreme changes. If we leave that particular resolution the way it is, residentials would be paying a 7.90 increase that equates to $207,552. Small commercials, 448 small commercial businesses would come in at a percentage of 5.70% with a $35 increase and would generate $53,760 annually. Under the large commercial, 65, they would generate at 1%, $23,400, bringing the total generation of $284,712 a year, causing us to extend that into 4 years. My question to the commission is, after this spreadsheet that has been presented to you, are there any questions or concerns?
Yeah, so I spent some time just kind of crunching some numbers, what is sent here, and I'm still personally of the mindset of the $8 across the board. I mean, one thing, so when you break down the numbers, that's the overall numbers of all the meters and stuff, but when you break it down individually, it shows you the difference of the impact a little more. So like under the current plan, for the term of the whole plan to pay off, and this is based off of the rate that the amount that we were working with. That's the estimated rate. It's not the final rate, but working off the estimated rate that we had, it would take 49 months to cover the cost, and a residential meter would be $392. A large commercial over that same time would be $1,470. I mean, that's a pretty substantial difference. That's $1,000 more for a single meter over the term of the whole payback. And when you get into the large commercial, when I talked with the insurance at the college, they have 28 meters total up at the college.
28.
28. They have 18 small and 10 large commercial meters. So for the college to pay that, they're looking at almost $24,000 for the college of extra cost over the course of the term to pay this back.
Over the 4 years?
Yes.
24,000.
Almost $24,000
Okay.
for the college alone to pay And if you just split that up to $8 across the board, like they had proposed, you know, it's only going to cost them $12,000, which saves them almost half their costs. But at the same time, it only extends the term out for about another 5 months because there's not that many large commercial meters out there to make any kind of an impact. So as far as residential meters go, you're adding about $40 as a whole. So I guess it just depends on how we want to look at it. You know, if we're looking at it as, you know, this was an absorbent, a massive cost that we're just trying to, city's paying off, and we're just trying to kind of split up as evenly as we can just to incur the cost as a whole as a community, or are we trying to base things more on large commercials and sometimes small commercials, not always, tend to use more energy? Are we trying to offset their costs so that they're paying more of that? But at the same time, if we're doing that, we're also just estimating, just kind of guessing how much we feel like they need to pay of that cost. You know, there's some residential homes that use more energy than a lot of small commercial businesses. So those small commercial businesses should be paying more of that cost. So I just think we're playing a balancing game of how we feel the cost should be spread out without really having the answers as to how the cost should really be spread out.
You're exactly right. Now, I agree with you there. One of the issues that I see in the area is that, you know, at this point, we really don't know where the costs really are. I mean, we don't know how much the big businesses used, because, I mean, we don't have that information, and we don't know what the residential portion is, or the small businesses. And so it's hard for us, you know, to be able to make a decision on really how we should diversify those costs without having complete information where the major hits were at. And so, you know, agree. But, you know, in essence, you know, we only went up $32. You know, I mean, at the way that the initial was $26.75, Mary, complete total billings. I think that's what at $8 we were going to raise $256,000 annually. At the rate that it was proposed at the last commission, it ends up at $284,000, basically only about $29,000 more than what we were originally going to collect. So I guess my question to you, Mary, is, so when would we know exactly where the emphasis of the costs really were? Well, sure. I mean, when would we know exactly what the bill of the college, the school, the hospital, were? You know, I mean, how would we know where the main consumption was at?
Well, because I don't think that's really a fair question, because this cost isn't based upon their consumption, correct?
Well, sure it is.
This is just an added cost from down there.
Well,
Generating ours.
yeah, we did, but we're paying that money back. So the formula here is to recoup that money. So I'm just trying to find out where the major consumers were at. I mean, you know, I mean, if you said the college has got 28,
Well, they got 28, and then the high school has quite a few meters also.
Right.
I think 15, right, is what they have. It's my understanding. Huh?
Right.
Yeah, and that's what I'm asking for. I mean, it would give us.
You also use more, I mean, they were right, they use more than
Yeah.
your small.
Well,
Sure.
and we used more because it was cold too.
Sure.
Each person, residence or business, used a little bit more. But I'm in agreement with Aaron. I think it still should be $8 across the board. that's just the cost on top of what our regular power was gonna cost us for everybody. It's not that we didn't use, those commercial businesses use more. The elevators shut down. They didn't use hardly any. They did not ship any grains out, so they didn't operate on those days. You know, in the school, I don't know if, wasn't that over a weekend too? Part of it was on a weekend, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think
Monday
that
through
was all
Sunday.
during.
So
the
they
week,
were
but-
probably in school, but they still used their power, but at the original rate, but then they just got tacked on this extra $8.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's,
And to pick that 6-day period or that 8-day period is gonna be very difficult on a whole month bill.
right.
Very difficult to figure out.
Nope.
Each customer will confuse.
But that's not how Sunflower billed us. Sunflower
not.
billed us on our
Higher.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
plus our
Okay.
generation.
Yeah.
Because they turned around and sold our generation back to us.
Sure.
We produced it for $100 and some and it sold it to us for $3,000 or $4,000.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Here's why I thought the businesses should pay more. Residential, it's 12.7 cents a kilowatt. Small commercial, it's 11 cents. Big one, it's 9 cents. So they get a break right there.
Your large commercials paying
Demand at $9.50 a kilowatt.
$9.50 a KW, so it's not really, they're getting a lower energy charge, but they're paying.
You got the demand meter too.
And I
That's
mean,
$9.50.
I don't wanna pull or drop names, but, I mean, the college has already been brought up. But one of our largest consumers in town had 1 meter. And so that large consumer is getting charged $30 a month, while the college would be getting charged 6,000 or whatever that was.
24,000.
$500 a month.
Over, yeah.
Yeah.
So 5,000. You know, to me, that's, yeah, we tried to make it as simple as we could, and, you know, where people would, you know, $8, I think people would be able to absorb $8 and push it on. It's some of the businesses are gonna get $8 at their house, and then they're gonna get $30 here, and it's just like that. So that's why we had to keep it simple, just do the method. It's like we're trying to push $8, we figured out to be the least amount of complaining in town.
I know at my business, my electric bill is less at my business than it is at my house. And I know there's gonna be a lot of small businesses that are that way. Why should we get penalized more for being a business?
I know several houses that, you know, over 2,000 kilowatts a month. I know a couple of them are probably closer to 4,000 kilowatts a month. They probably could have used it. You don't do that in residential.
Right.
Hey, John.
Yes.
So, is there any way we can? It just doesn't feel like there's, ever since the spreadsheet come out, there's enough information. And it's like maybe just table it where we can get some more information and dig in deeper with some of these large bills or the small business bills, and I don't know. I don't want to just hearing everything. I want to be fair. I don't want to be charging a small business more when their usage is less than their residential. But yet, on the flip side of it, you know, if a large user is going to be, their bill is 4 or 5 times, and I don't care how many meters they got, if their bill is 4 or 5 times or supposed to be, we are never going to recoup that back, no matter, you know, $8 or $30 a meter. They're going to, that spreadsheet shows. I don't know. It just seems like there's a lot more information that comes out when I like another run at it, I think.
Well, I'd be in favor of that. I mean, you know, table it till maybe till I don't know when Alan's going to be back, but I know that he had Did you guys look at your calendars for the 22nd? Coming up on Monday, he was, I guess you got some information on that. Well, are you going to be available then?
I think I was, yeah, but I hadn't heard back as to where.
I haven't, either, but I was just wondering. No, I'd be willing to do that.
We can talk it over, it's fine
Huh?
with me.
I mean, I don't know how deep. I guess we can either decide to do something like we're doing here, where there's, a set rate for everybody or set rate depending on where your meter is, commercial or residential, or are you going to look into finding out exactly what everybody's usage is and bill them each accordingly depending on what their usage, which seems like a massive headache. And it seems like
Well,
something that's
And a
gonna
paper night,
a headache, and not to mention
and a nightmare.
is gonna probably make a lot of people very angry, angrier than we should be trying to make anybody as far as this whole thing goes. But if you want to wait and discuss things more, that's fine with me.
Yep.
Based upon usage, think about in the summer months, we're gonna get a lot more.
Right.
And like the ag, where they're running their fans, they're gonna get a lot more. So, I mean, you have different seasons.
Sure, sure.
They hit different customers.
Well, I think you have a consensus here. When do you get, when you get back, you can check in with Mary or Valens here, and then we'll try to set up a time that we can get together just to go over the numbers. I mean, I'd like to say to our constituents listening out there before we become presumptuous on anything to allow the commission. It could be that we stay under the normal terms as your leaders. We're only trying to educate ourselves on the logistic of everything that's taking place here and be fair and honest to everyone. So please bear with us. We trust that you understand the position that we're in as far as making decisions. So, we're table this until we can set a date. We'll try to set a date prior to April 1st because those when the right before April 1st. Right. Okay. Sure. We'll try to do that. So we'll do that, and then no other thoughts. I'm going to move on to item number 6, formal action, IFB 2021-02 bid award on a new truck. I looked at it. I'm comfortable with the recommendations. I think we came in at $30,0220 from Dan Bierner, right? Yeah. So, I mean, the money's in the budget. I don't see any problem. I think Neil's got some plans on what you're going to already use it for, right? Yeah. And so, is there any questions for the commission on this bid?
Well, with the 10% overage, why that, I think we ought to go with Dan Brenner.
So, you want to make that motion?
I'll make the motion, we go with Dan Brenner for his bid.
The amount of $30,020.
Yep.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Ferris. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Have a second by Commissioner Thompson. Any questions or concerns? Mary, read the roll.
Thompson,
Yes.
Ferris,
Yes.
Howard,
Yes.
Rumble,
Yes.
Garcia.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, we move on to reports. Obviously, the city manager is not here, so we're going to move on to city commissioners' report. We're going to start with Aaron.
I don't have anything.
All right, thank you. JJ?
I don't have anything either. Just like to say thanks to all the employees.
Gary?
The rain dance worked, that's all I can say.
Yes. Well, under the JD.
Nope, nothing, thanks.
Okay. So on the mayor's report, I have nothing to report. I think there was good, healthy discussion, and we'll look forward to meeting again. With that being said, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move.
Moved by Commissioner Thompson, second by Commissioner Ferris. All those in favor say aye.
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 Meeting adjourned.